Welcome to our latest explainer. So, step inside, pull up a chair, and honestly, you might want to leave the lights on for this one. Today, we are exploring a genuinely terrifying first-person testimony from a man named Daniel Harper. We're going to break down his account of the 6 weeks he spent working at Blackwood Memorial Cemetery. And let me tell you, it's a stint that brought him face to face with a dark, completely impossible reality. Just look at the gravity of that statement. Daniel has kept this secret locked away for years, mostly because, well, as he admits, most people simply wouldn't believe him. I mean, I want you to imagine living with a memory so visceral, so deeply burned into your brain, that years later your eyes still snap open in the pitch black at exactly 3:13 a.m. every single night, usually with the faint sound of a woman whispering your name. We're going to examine the evidence he laid out, piece by chilling piece. Part 1. The night shift. Okay, let's dive into this. The year was 2021. Daniel was 24, completely desperate for cash after losing his warehouse gig, and he was struggling to make rent. So he stumbles upon an online listing for a night cemetery caretaker, and it paid unusually well. Honestly, way too well for the kind of work they were describing. But hey, when you're desperate, you don't always ask the right questions, do you? On paper, this job sounded like an absolute breeze. Lock the gates at sunset, shine a flashlight around the grounds, and call it a night. Easy, right? But the reality of Blackwood Memorial Cemetery was profoundly isolating and deeply, deeply unsettling. We're talking over 12,000 graves bordered entirely by these dense, oppressive woods. Sections of this place dated all the way back to the 1800s, just forgotten, crooked headstones covered in weeds. Daniel noted that even in broad daylight, there was this undeniable, creeping feeling of being watched. Oh, and the ultimate red flag? The cemetery director, this exhausted-looking guy named Mr. Calloway, who had these massive dark circles under his eyes, he casually mentions that the previous caretaker had just quit, without any notice. Now, things didn't start off in high gear. The first 4 nights were actually entirely mundane, just the sound of crickets and the wind. But on the 5th night, right around 2 a.m., that mundane reality completely cracked. After a heavy rainstorm, Daniel found fresh footprints in the mud, and as he tracked them, they led directly toward a very specific, forgotten grave. I want you to really think about that for a second. You are entirely alone in a massive, dark cemetery. You follow a trail of fresh, muddy footprints, only to realize they are strictly outgoing. It was as if whoever made them simply appeared out of thin air or, stepped right out of the earth. These impossible tracks led straight away from an abandoned plot belonging to an Emily Carter, dated 1964 to 1987, a grave that no one had visited in years, suddenly covered in impossibly fresh flowers. Part 2, the 3:13 a.m. anomalies. Because things were about to go from vaguely unsettling to downright malevolent. You see, the terror at Blackwood Cemetery began to anchor itself to a very specific, recurring time. 3:13 a.m. Exactly. On night 8, Daniel actually checked his phone clock twice just to be absolutely sure. As he was doing his patrol, he saw a woman standing perfectly still among the graves. She had long, dark hair, wearing a white dress. When Daniel called out to her, nothing. She didn't respond. He stepped closer, and the temperature plummeted so fast his breath actually plumed into the freezing air. She slowly turned her faceless, shadowed head toward him, and then she just vanished. She didn't run away, she didn't duck behind a stone, she literally dissolved like smoke, leaving behind absolutely zero footprints, but leaving this overwhelming, sickly stench of dead roses. But the haunting didn't just stay out in the dark grounds, it actually infiltrated the technology. The very next morning, Daniel was checking the security footage, expecting to find a trespasser. Instead, at exactly 3:13 a.m., the camera facing Emily's grave dissolved into 27 seconds of pure, buzzing static. When the picture finally cut back, a pale, motionless figure stood right by the grave for exactly 3 frames before blinking out of existence. And then, the phone calls started. Every single night, right at 3:13 a.m., his cell phone would ring. If he actually had the nerve to answer it, he'd just hear 13 seconds of static, weird crackling, and a woman crying softly somewhere in the distance. And this brilliantly illustrates the utter helplessness of the whole situation. When Daniel showed that terrifying 3-frame security glitch to the cemetery director, Mr. Calloway, absolutely panicked. He slammed the monitor shut, his face went completely pale with terror, and he just gave Daniel this singular cryptic warning: don't go near that grave after midnight. When Daniel begged him for an explanation, Calloway offered absolutely nothing. He just completely refused to answer. Part 3. The Missing Girl. Daniel was officially done running from the unknown. I mean, if Calloway wasn't going to tell him what was going on, Daniel decided to dig into the history of that forgotten plot himself. He had to find out exactly who or what was buried down there. So he methodically researches Emily Carter, and what he uncovers is a chilling local mystery. In October of 1987, 23-year-old Emily left her job and simply ceased to exist. Massive town searches yielded 0 clues, 0 suspects. Eventually, she was declared legally dead, and her grieving family purchased a memorial grave at Blackwood Cemetery just to have some kind of closure. But the crucial detail here? Emily's body was never found, meaning the coffin resting 6 feet under the earth was supposed to be completely, 100% empty. The real horror hit Daniel when he managed to pull up her old missing person poster. His blood literally turned to ice. The face, the hair, the eyes staring back from his computer screen. It was her. It was the exact same woman he saw standing motionless in the freezing cemetery air. The woman in white. Part 4. The Open Grave. Because the haunting wasn't just confined to the cemetery anymore, it escalated violently when it followed him home. 3 days later, this mysterious, unmarked package arrives at Daniel's apartment. Inside is a crisp, physical photograph of Daniel standing right next to Emily's grave. And right behind him, smiling, is the blurry figure of the woman in white. But get this, the metadata on the photo proved it was taken at 3:13 a.m., a time when Daniel was fast asleep in his own bed over 30 miles away. He went to the police, but they found absolutely nothing. Well, Daniel had finally had enough. He decided his next shift would be his very last. But the cemetery wasn't quite done with him yet. On his final night, as the clock struck that dreaded number, 3:13 a.m., every single light in Blackwood Memorial Cemetery violently cut out, plunging him into total, suffocating darkness. And from that blackness, whispers started echoing around him. "Help me, help me, help me." The voices weren't coming from the trees or the wind. No. Daniel realized with a sickening drop in his stomach that this hushed, frantic female voice was echoing directly up from the freshly disturbed dirt of Emily Carter's grave. Against every single survival instinct screaming in his brain, Daniel slowly approached. His flashlight beam cut through the dark, illuminating a genuinely horrifying sight. The grave was open. The earth had been violently clawed away, and the coffin lid was partially exposed. He stepped closer, the whispers vibrating in the air all around him, and he aimed his light straight down into the supposedly empty coffin. What he saw down there completely defies logic. There was no skeleton, no remains whatsoever. Instead, neatly stacked inside that wooden box were hundreds and hundreds of photographs. Pictures of former caretakers, maintenance workers, random visitors, all standing right beside Emily's grave. Some were yellowed from decades ago, some were recent. Then he spotted the photo of himself from the package, and right underneath it, a brand new photograph. A picture of Daniel standing beside the open coffin, looking inside, taken only seconds earlier. Before his brain could even begin to process that impossible photo, a freezing, rock-hard hand clamped down onto his shoulder. Daniel spun around to find Emily Carter inches from his face. She looked exactly like her missing person poster, except her eyes were completely black voids. No pupils, no whites, just endless dark. She smiled this terrible, unnatural smile and whispered, "Now you're part of it." And suddenly the very ground beneath the cemetery began to violently shake, and those hundreds of photographs down inside the open coffins started to rustle, as if invisible hands were frantically flipping through them. So the crucial point is, Part 5, the final photograph. Because Daniel did not stick around to find out what happened next. He ran faster than he ever had in his entire life, threw himself into his truck, and peeled out of that cemetery without ever once checking his rearview mirror. The very next morning, he marched in and resigned. Mr. Calloway didn't even ask a single question. He just looked deeply, profoundly relieved that Daniel had actually survived the night. And Daniel really tried to put the nightmare behind him. Years passed, the trauma slowly faded into this dull ache, until one day, just last year, a ping in his inbox brought the whole thing rushing back. It was an email from the current caretaker at Blackwood Cemetery. The message contained no gradings, no context whatsoever, just a single, bone-chilling question. Why is there a photograph of you inside Emily Carter's grave?
Attached to that email was a digital image, a perfectly clear, high-resolution photo. It showed Daniel standing right beside Emily Carter's tombstone. He was looking directly into the camera lens, and he was smiling.
But here is the terrifying reality. The metadata on that email attachment showed the photo had been taken just 3 weeks prior, but Daniel hasn't stepped foot anywhere near Blackwood Cemetery since the night he ran for his life all those years ago. Or at least, he has absolutely no memory of ever going back.
Which leaves us to ponder this one deeply disturbing thought. The next time you find yourself walking past an old, forgotten grave, look very carefully at the old photographs left behind on the stone. Because Daniel's story really makes you wonder, were the people in those pictures actually there when the photo was taken? Or did the grave simply reach out and claim a piece of them forever? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Until next time, stay curious and please stay safe.